Okay, if everybody could find a seat, please, we're ready to get started. Just fill in some spots, come down to the front. It's great. Come on, all you young people, get in here. This is wonderful. 1, 2, 3. Hey, you guys, these are refugees from school, I think. What are they doing? This is great. Okay, we got a pretty full agenda. We've only got probably a couple more weeks after today where we're going to have 2 more capital clarities, and if not longer, but I think we're kind of narrowing down on things. But this has been great. We have a big agenda with Dave Lindsay is going to be speaking. He's a retired law enforcement officer. He's also a military veteran, and he used to live in Texas. And he now permanently resides in Idaho, and he's been working on the Foundation Heroes on helmets, and it's a great foundation. I encourage you to check it all out when you get out of here. I also want you to know he drove 6 hours to be here today. It's amazing how far people will drive to get here. And he's going to talk to you about his experiences on the southern border. But real fast, I want to go through who else is going to be coming so you don't sneak off on me. We're going to have Representative Cody Galloway, who's going to get up and talk about reimbursement of educational expenses. That you're going to love it, HB 293. And then we're going to have Representative Wendy Horman talk about the educational savings account, which are going to provide a lot of options for our students. Next, we're going to have Gayanne DeMordaunt. And some of you have seen her before. She's also a fireball, House Bill 298. And she's going to talk about parental notification for vaccines. Good and timely stuff. It just passed out of the House yesterday. And then we'll also have Small Arms Protection Act. It finally is now a bill. And so Senator Christy Zito will talk about that. And if I have time, I will talk to you about my bill, House Bill 174, which deals with school boards now. They may negotiate with teachers' unions instead of shall. So I'll talk to you about that soon. But we're going to get Dave up here because he's going to talk for about 20 minutes and take some questions. So Dave, if you'd come on up, please, and let's give him a big rousing applause. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with you all today. As she had mentioned, I'm an Idaho resident now, so don't hold that against me. And I'm from Texas, so I'm sure you can't tell from my accent. Have family that originated in Idaho. My mom's side, I have grandparents that were from Ketchum and Twin Falls. And on my father's side, some of them were the original mountain men that settled in southeast Idaho in the 1820s. So I have a history in Idaho. But I'm here today to provide some information that some of you may or may not know. A lot of it's not known through the media. There's volumes of things that you could find in the stuff they don't tell you. I'm a retired law enforcement officer from Texas. Spent 18 and a half years in law enforcement down there. Was also in the military. A lot of things you don't see with immigration and such is the cost that it costs the taxpayers. In Texas, decisions that are made in Washington, D.C. affect the taxpayers directly in Texas through education assistance, utility assistance, rent assistance, medical assistance, and the food stamp food assistance. All cost taxpayers. Federal government is not assisting in that. Not to mention it trickles down into our schools, having to have teachers be able to teach in foreign languages and teach English as a second language. So again, there's a cost that's drastic. 2014, Texas spent in the tens of millions of dollars just printing the state forms in a foreign language. So imagine what that would cost Idahoans to have to do the same thing, not to mention jobs. In Texas, they're fortunate because Texas is an agricultural state, huge agricultural state, but they've got industry as far as petroleum. In the last 20, 25 years, the tech industry has moved there, so they have kind of the best of all 3 worlds helping the state subsidize a lot of the stuff that the taxpayers are having to pay. But Idaho is primarily agricultural. So if a vast majority of people move up here, it's going to affect Idaho's jobs and Idahoans for people that mostly do not pay 1 penny in federal income tax. As a matter of fact, years ago, Texas actually looked at abolishing sales tax to implement an income tax. But with the millions of illegal immigrants that were there, they found if they did that, the local economies would suffer because they wouldn't get any money. So they end up adopting to stay with sales tax and not have an income tax solely because of that reason. But getting on to why I'm here, I was a law enforcement officer in Texas, came out of the military, became a cop. And in 2009, my partner and I responded to a disturbance at a Tejano bar. And when we got there, we were jumped by 6 illegals. And we had an all-out brawl. I ended up tearing 3 tendons in my left shoulder, had to have reconstructive surgery. Spent 11 months in physical therapy, subsequently was retired. Spent an additional 7 months in physical therapy. During that time, the district attorney chose to just deport the individuals who had all 5 of the 6 had been deported at least a half dozen times prior for various crimes, instead of spending taxpayer funds to prosecute them. So I didn't even have anybody that I could sue when my career abruptly ended for injuries that I still am stuck with. But I was in the military, was a member of the Texas Air Guard, and in 2014, I volunteered for a mission that the governor deployed a number of folks to the National Guard to the Texas border. Now, I'm still under NDAs from the state of Texas, so there's specific things I cannot talk about legally. And I'm here to share some of those experiences with you. Because here in Idaho, we feel we're so far removed, and most of the people I talk with feel that they're so far removed from the border issue that it really doesn't affect them. So, after 6 years at that time, with the current administration at that time, Rick Perry, who was the governor, was asking for help, and after 6 years, the most help they got was metal signs to put up along the highway saying, "Don't pick up hitchhikers, they're dangerous." Okay, so Rick Perry had enough. We knew at that time that Al-Qaeda had been working with the cartels for at least 12 to 14 years. All right, again, working with the terrorists to move things and people into the United States. Now, 3/4 of the legal entry points along our southern border are in Texas. So Texas bears a big brunt in dealing with the illegal crossing issue. At that time, when the governor deployed and asked for volunteers, there were 1,000 or more National Guardsmen and women who volunteered for that mission to protect Texas, because it wasn't being done from the federal government side. And being a law enforcement officer and seeing the effects of the drugs that came across the border, of which are right here in Idaho and originate south of Texas. All right, just to give you an idea, as we speak, there are cartel and organized crime moving drugs from other states through Idaho, including people in human trafficking through Idaho to other states as we speak. And again, most people think it's an issue that's 1,500 to 1,800 miles from here. But those effects down there have a drastic effect on what we see here. So we volunteered, and within 48 to 72 hours, the Obama administration came down and said any equipment, anything purchased with federal funds cannot be used on that mission. No vehicles, anything. Which floored me to see how an administration would intentionally interfere with the state trying to protect its citizens and do the right thing. But as Texans serving Texans, we persevered and just pushed it forward. Now, prior to that mission, it was Operation Strong Safety, they estimated we were interdicting about less than 40% of what was crossing the border. And just so you know, the cartels, the Gulf Cartel, the Los Zetas, the Sinaloa Cartel, are all embattled along the border in territories that they claim. So the idea that a family decides in Mexico or in Central America that they're going to go to America and have a better life and they just cross the border is not the case. They all have to go through and pay the cartel to cross, or bad things happen to them for disobeying and basically, as they call it, trespassing. So moving people, massive amounts of people across the border, you see all the problems that come with that. As we're dealing right now, going into a year of an infectious disease, Texas has been dealing with that for years with tuberculosis, which was cured, back on the rise on the border, and a host of other ailments that also affect Texans. The Texas State Guard, as well as the National Guard, were deployed. And Texas has actually been training for pandemic for years. They do an operation called Operation Lone Star on the border in various locations along the border to vaccinate children and people who don't have their vaccinations, but they do that as a preparatory event for a potential pandemic and making sure the National Guard and the State Guard are all prepared to deal with those type of things. So dealing with pandemic is something that they've trained for, they've prepared for. But the thing that they're not prepared for is a mass influx of people crossing the border. All those folks that are having to go through the cartel are also forced to participate in the movement of drugs across the border. So just to give you an idea, it's not just marijuana that you see a lot of states trying to legalize to reduce the criminal impact upon the prison systems. But we're talking about opium-based products. We're talking about now fentanyl. And just to give you an idea, how many of y'all have heard of the fentanyl issue? Quite a few of you. So when you look at a gram bag of sugar, if that was fentanyl, it contains approximately 17,000 particulates in that 1 gram bag of fentanyl. And it only takes 5 or 6 of those particulates to kill a human. So when you look and see that they're interdicting pounds upon pounds of fentanyl crossing the border that's being laced with other drugs, directly affects Americans and ultimately at some point affects Idahoans. Now, when you have been in my shoes and you're part of a team that go out and track people that are here illegally as they've crossed the border, and you have 40 individuals wearing camouflage, carrying what looks to be hay bales on their shoulders that are marijuana, that's a vast amount for just one interdiction. But the thing that we found is after we would interdict these folks, 80% of those people are south of our border, meaning they're Mexican, Central American, and South American. 60% are from Central and South America. Only 20% are from Mexico. But of the total number of people we were interdicting, 20% were Middle Eastern and Asian. 20%. So when you have Middle Eastern males that are dressing as Mexicans, they're assimilating with Mexicans, they're speaking Spanish and crossing the border. And those are the ones that we've caught. And I can tell you unequivocally, when you have people in the federal government stand before the media and say they've never interdicted an Islamic terrorist on the southern border, I can tell you for a fact that is false. Now, With that being said, men and women are working as we speak to try and stop that, to try to curb that flow. During 2014 and 2015, within months of the governor and the state and National Guard and the Texas Highway Patrol, with their mission plan that they put together, we were interdicting over 90% of everything that was crossing the border. Within 6 months, there was intelligence information obtained on cartel chatter that they had marijuana and drugs going bad in warehouses because they couldn't get it across the border fast enough. They went from moving 50, 100 to 150 pounds of drugs at a time to moving 1,000, 15, 2,000 pounds of drugs at a time, making it easier to interdict. And just to give you an idea, in Texas, the Texas Highway Patrol has a fleet of 6 patrol boats. And you can look them up, just look up on the internet, Texas Highway Patrol boats patrolling the Rio Grande. And they are armed with belt-fed machine guns, same as our military uses. They're up-armored. You have a sophisticated system of intelligence in the state working with the National Guard to try to interdict what was crossing. They set up listening and observation posts, military along our borders from El Paso down to Brownsville and various places. And then also the governor deployed a vast number of highway patrol assets to the border to do interdiction. So it was a team effort in Texas. And in Texas, the highway patrol typically, no matter what region they're out of, will do a rotation deployment down to the border specifically for interdiction. So when you look at it, those numbers, it's probably like drinking out of a fire hose with what I'm telling you right now. But just to give you an idea, we were coming off mission because we had a satellite communication device fail. So we had a unit that left Lackland Air Force Base and was going to meet us halfway. That way our sector wasn't out of service too long. And we were sitting at a checkpoint, and I can't tell you what checkpoint it was, but I can tell you it wasn't even halfway through the year. And this checkpoint wasn't even on the border. It was 70 miles inland. And Customs and Border Protection had their apprehension numbers that they had apprehended going through the checkpoint. This isn't our teams catching them, walking across the desert. This is apprehension that was made at the checkpoint. And at that time, it was 27,000 people and 30-some-odd thousand pounds, correction, it was 27,000 people and 70-some-odd thousand pounds of drugs. All right. This gets better. 6 days later, we were rotating our team off our mission, and we're at that same checkpoint, and those numbers had changed from 27,000 to 39,000 people, and from 70,000 pounds of drugs to over 90,000 pounds in 6 days at one checkpoint. That's not including everything that was interdicted along the highways, anything that was intercepted, interdicted, out crossing, that drove through the checkpoint. And if you recall, back in 2014, 2015, there was a huge thing in the media of all the unaccompanied minors that were in the United States. Over 60,000. And what people don't realize is the cartels, as ruthless as they are, were kidnapping kids out of Guatemala and El Salvador, pushing them over 1,000 miles from Mexico's southern border, which has a wall, by the way, through Mexico to the southern border of Texas, and pushing them across specifically to overwhelm our Customs and Border Protection personnel. We had over 7,000 housed at Lackland Air Force Base. And they were housed at various locations all over the United States. Again, this is coming at taxpayers' expense, but the initial brunt of it was Texas taxpayers. Now, I can tell you, after being on that mission, after costing the cartel millions of dollars a day, after coming off that mission is why I decided to move to Idaho. Well, there's a lot fewer people. But the fact of the matter is, I can tell you it would be nice if those men and women that are working and on that mission right now, because the governor, Greg Abbott, who was the former Attorney General, has once again deployed the National Guard to the border with a massive influx of people. And when those people cross, all the problems that they will bring with it, not to include the infectious disease, but all the other problems with a massive amount of people, come the hiding in plain sight of the organized crime that goes along with it. And the things that people do not think of here because it's so far removed, it's in another state. But I can tell you people, it's a 22-hour drive or a 24-hour drive to here. In one day, they're here. So if I have a moment, I'd like to answer any questions that I might be able to.
In your opinion, what is the incentive for them to leave the border open, and what can we, the people, do to stop it?
Well, I think the incentive from a political perspective doesn't make sense. There is no incentive. But the incentive comes from the organized crime. They're the ones that ultimately are benefiting from it. And the Americans' sensacious appetite for illegal narcotics is what's helping to drive that. Yes, sir.
How close are the numbers for the border crossing that you saw to the actual numbers that are reported? Because in the news over the years, it's been 11 million illegals for the last decade. And so what are you seeing?
I can't tell you the actual number, but when I can tell you that in less than half a year, when you have over 30,000 people at one checkpoint in 1 year, and 3/4 of the checkpoints along our southern border are in Texas, that just gives you an idea that's going through the checkpoint. If you notice, nobody wants to talk about and talk directly to our Customs and Border Patrol personnel to find out exact numbers, and we're being advised that a lot of them are being told that they're not able to talk about it to the media. So, I would urge you to get with your representatives to find those facts and figures out from CBP personnel themselves. But I can tell you this, it would be nice if other states would advise the governor in Texas that they support his actions. And it's not a racist or ethnic thing. Like I said, we interdict people from all over the world. Asia, Western Asia, Southeast Asia, Europe, Africa. So this isn't a racial thing. This is an American securing our border thing. And if the borders aren't secured, it's only going to create more problems that we'll see directly affecting Idaho. Yes, sir.
I watched a speech that your governor, Governor Abbott, gave, and he's pushing, I think, some legislation for Texas to step up and finish the wall. And I think it would be a good idea for our legislature to consider possibly taking some of that budget surplus and helping Texas do that.
Well, I can just say that, when you're down there, when you're down there and you're on that mission and you're out there in the sun for 14-hour shifts and you're having to interdict these people and subject yourself to the dangers there, it's nice to know that Americans, not just Texans, but Americans support your efforts. Because what you're initially, that is the front line, and Texas has been fighting a border war for well over 12 years, literally. Yes, ma'am.
Can they not just close the border?
I'm sure they could. I mean, you're using a 5-letter word called logic that isn't used a lot of times. So, yes, ma'am.
Yes, I know that the wall is a good thing, but don't they have also for human trafficking underground tunnels?
Yes, ma'am, there is.
Idaho and,
They are uncovering those all the time, trying to close them, but you're talking about a criminal organization that has more money than the entire country of Mexico. So it's a constant, our tactics and their tactics are constantly changing and then having to adapt. Yes, sir.
How much in your experience have you seen cartel armed activity against Border Patrol go up over the last 3-4 years?
Over the last 3 or 4 years, it was actually most likely, if you check, was down due to the intense efforts to keep the border secured and actually have those personnel doing what they needed to do for their own safety. Prior to that, it was a constant issue. I can tell you I was back in Texas training SWAT down in South Texas in 2016. And while I was on the range training, we had cartel border walls literally just 100, 200 meters away from us. Had cartel several hundred yards on the other side of that, cut loose rounds that impacted our area, and I took frag to my left hand and had to have surgery to have the frag removed. But finding out that is apparently a routine occurrence that the cartel knows when the cops are training, and they like to let them know they're still over on the other side. Yes, ma'am.
I can tell you, I worked ICE detention and removal, and everything he's saying is correct, and the numbers we're getting are just a drop in what's actually happened. I was a numbers person, and I actually worked at the same time he did, and I was getting a case on my desk. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your service.
Daryl, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Legislation does not give monies to that.
Yeah, I was thinking it's kind of hard to put a fence up in the river. Why don't they have the American side put prisons, sewage treatment plants, bombing ranges?
Well, that's above my pay grade, sir, but it's a good idea. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think that making everybody attends these is a good goal is to figure out what we can do, right? What we can do as citizens. So one is education, becoming more aware. I think most of us know the messaging has not been appropriate, that there was probably a day when people crossing over really were just coming to work, but that's long since gone, right? You hear the rangers talk about the deaths they find in crime. So one, we all know that there's an issue that the folks coming over, it's trafficking drugs and tied to the cartels, so it needs to be stopped. Number two then is education and awareness. So I guess my third question is that as we become more aware as citizens, what types of things are you saying then that we could do to help change? I like what he suggested. Is it really pressuring our politicians then and just helping wake up citizens? Because that's my question then. What more do you guys see that we could do to help with this issue?
A lot of it is, like you had mentioned, educating yourselves beyond what is just being told by the media. Everything that you get into politics and things get drowned out. But you can actually look at the actual facts and figures. If you go to, when it comes to Second Amendment issues and a lot of the crime issues as far as violence crime, go to the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting Statistics, the UCRs, the things that the media will never discuss. Those are actual facts and figures on hard violent crime that is categorized by law enforcement every year in the United States. And those facts and figures, again, are coming directly from the Bureau.
Yeah. That's ridiculous.
Thank you all very much for your time.
Hang on. We're gonna be around. We're gonna stay for a little bit.
Yes, ma'am.
Dave will be here until the end of the hour, so you can still ask more questions, but we're going to get going right now. Thank you
ma'am.
so much. That
Thank you
was
very much.
excellent information.
you.
Appreciate it. Okay, so Beth is going to come up and give you a little tutorial for a minute before we have our speaker, Representative Galloway, come up, so go ahead.
So we were thinking it would be helpful and effective for you guys to be able to track the bills that we talk about each week. So you know kind of what happened to them, if anything happened to them, where they're at. So the home, okay, so we're here. This is the easiest way that I always do it is I just Google Idaho legislature and you're gonna find the homepage. And then from there, you're gonna go to, you'll see this, you'll go to legislative sessions. And then from there, you're going to go to, I'm trying to look, so to the bill center. So when you get to the bill center, go to legislative, right, and then you're going to go down to House bills. There's going to be numbers on all of them, and you'll be able to track them that way. So today, if we're talking about, say, House Bill 293, you can click on that bill, and it's going to tell you basically everything from the start to the finish of that bill and where it's at currently. So I think that's really good. We get the information out to you guys, and you're able to, at that point, figure out what's happened to it. I mean, and if anything's happened to it at all. And so it'll be helpful for you today. They're going to talk about these bills but that's kind of how you do it. It's just a 4-step process, really quick and easy. And if you ever have any questions about them or want to, see what happened with it, there you have it. So you can also find out who your legislator is on the homepage of this too. It's going to have type in your address. And that way, if you feel like you see that they're sponsoring something that you like, or you feel any of those things, you can find out who they are and their contact information. And that's all there too. And I think that's effective as well. So. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Can you pull that back up, Dustin, the vote on that one? Okay, so we're going to have Representative Galloway come up. She's a freshman legislator, and she is a fireball, too. We have a lot of fireballs. Anyway, she's from District 15, correct?
Yes.
Yes, and this bill is huge, and she moved it through with a lot of confidence and a lot of good points that are going to help our kids, so you're going to love this bill. So go ahead, Representative. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me just a moment to talk a little bit about this bill. It's really important to me. I'm a mom. I'm a former elementary school teacher, and as I campaigned this summer for the very first time, especially got into September, and I knocked thousands of doors, and my team helped me, and there's several of my team members that are here today, so thank you. But something specific happened that kind of clicked in my mind, and I was knocking on a door, and the mom came to the door, and she had a math workbook in her hand and was working with one kiddo. And I could see there was another child playing the piano, and kind of off to the other side was a student that was playing a violin, and a tutor was sitting next to her. And I'm like, wow, this is September. This is education. This family has really figured out COVID homeschooling. They are working hard. These kids are getting a great education. An hour later, I'm walking a neighborhood over, same school district, same schools, and I knocked on the door, and what happened was a little kid came running in. You know those like side windows that are kind of on the doors? A little toddler in a diaper came, and he had a bag of chips, a big bag of chips, not a little one, big bag of chips, and he is munching on these chips and looking at me, and he keeps eating those chips, and he's wearing this diaper, and that's it, and it's soggy, and I'm thinking, okay, who's home here? I'm just sitting there. I'm not going to leave now because I got to make sure that there's someone in this house. Eventually, after a long time waiting, a teenager came, a preteen kid, maybe 11, 12-ish, to the door. And he barely would look at me because he was playing, he told me, Fortnite on his phone. And he was kind of annoyed that I was there because he was in the middle of a Fortnite, and there was no adult for me to campaign to. It was just him, Fortnite, and little brother there. And I just walked away from that experience sick in my heart because there were two totally different educational experiences happening, and we did that. We shut the schools down, and when we did that, some people, the haves, kind of made things work, and the have-nots fell. And that's horrible, and we can't do that. So as I came here as a freshman, deciding what's most important, if I promise people I'm going to work on property taxes, I'm going to work on education, I'm going to make sure we have a business-friendly environment, the first thing I have to do is get these kids back in school. And so that's what this bill does. It just says schools need to be open for full-time in-person learning. And if they can't, or don't, or choose not to, then we provide a solution. We say, okay, parents, go withdraw your student, withdraw the funding as well with your student, and now you have the options to educate your child the best way that you can. And if that means hiring a violin tutor, if that means joining a private school, if that means buying curriculum, you get the choice back to make sure that your kid's educated and that you're not left without resources in this pandemic. So that's what the bill does. It just says, hey, bad things have happened. If schools can't open, actually, first it says open up. That's really what we want. We want the schools open. We love our teachers. We want our kids back in the classroom with the teachers. We know they can do an awesome job, but if they can't, we provide a solution to the parents, and they can solve this problem. So that's the bill. Any questions? I'll go ahead.
What about giving parents school vouchers so they have more control?
I'm going to let the next representative talk on that one because that's another bill that's coming. But that, good point. Yes?
How do you get all these bills passed with only like 2 weeks to go or so?
Man, I'm working hard. I'm running. As soon as I finish this, I have to go do an interview across the hall, so I'll be running out. Yes?
So just to make sure I'm clear, what you're saying is that they can go and pull whatever tax dollars they're they're paying into that school and pull them out. And then, so one step further, for those of us who have no children in the school district and are paying, I would adopt a family and own my tax dollars and give it to them to help them.
Excellent. I didn't go that far, but I think that's a great idea. Thank you. Yes?
So when pulling this money out, do they have any accountability to the schools at all? Do they get to do what they want? I'm hoping it's the latter.
We are going to trust parents to be accountable. They don't have to turn in anything to the individual school. There is an accountability for receipts, like you have to be able to, if asked, supply receipts that showed you spent the money on educational expenses.
So they can teach what they want.
Yes, it's not about curriculum, it's about money. We do make sure that the money's well spent. I'll take 2 more, is that okay? 2 more, you, and then we'll be done.
What's your realistic assessment that the governor will sign?
He loves the children too. This bill is about children. We have got to get our kids back in school, and he is going to support us. And we are veto-proof in the House. Yes. You had a question over here?
Yeah, so on that, do they have to be in school at the school for X amount of time? Or let's say they just close the school and we can take them out right away?
It has a definition of what full-time in-person school is, and it says by April 1st, the school has to open up, and if not, then you can withdraw your student.
So is that April 1st of this year?
Like in
The
like,
rest of the year? Or
yep,
is that-
like 20 days they have to get going.
So they don't have to be like 100 years or 100 days in and then you get it.
They don't. They just have to be in school, public school or charter. April 1st, school does not open, parent can go and say, I'd like to withdraw my student. That's why.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Excellent. Thank you, Representative Galloway. Now run down that hall and get your interview taken care of and do a good job. Let's see, our next speaker is going to be Representative Wendy Horman. She's talking about educational savings accounts. I do want you to look up here, though, if you can see, it does list the names of the representatives who voted aye on Representative Galloway's bill and who voted nay. And there's about 12 Democrats and the rest are Republicans. So you might want to always check that out when you look at these, who voted how. Okay, great. And Representative Horman, if you want to talk about your educational savings account, that'd be great. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good to be here with you today. This is the Strong Students Grant and Scholarship Program. So this bill is a result of the Espinoza case, which passed the Supreme Court, saying that if you're going to offer school choice in your state, you can't discriminate against religious providers. We have a very stiff Blaine Amendment in our state prohibiting that, and that case essentially invalidated our Blaine Amendment. And so this bill takes either a $500 grant and gives it to any public or non-public school student to use for the same eligible expenses that was in Representative Galloway's bill, or a scholarship for a smaller number of students. This bill is something of a compromise. It's not everything everybody wants, but it's a really important step forward in getting these scholarships available to students who, for one reason or another, need an alternative option. And in that case, they can get 90% of the funds that the average amount would have been available to use for private school or homeschooling or other alternatives, curriculum, tutoring, violin lessons. And so I do have a handout at the back door here. We're going to use a combination of federal funds and ongoing funds, but this is about a $40 million program that will put money into the hands of parents to make decisions about their child's education. So super high level. I have a radio interview myself as well at 1 o'clock, but I'm happy to take a few questions if you have any. Okay, awesome. Oh. So the State Board of Education is where the program will be housed. One of the concerns that came up with this bill is that it would give authority to the State Board of Education over homeschoolers. That is not the case. We went through a thorough walkthrough on the House floor, walking through the Constitution and how the state board only has authority over public school students. So if you're a homeschooling student, this doesn't change any authorities that you have to educate your child. If you're actually, I hope that answers the question. So it grants no new authorities to the State Board of Education over homeschoolers. They'll only be administering the program. This program existed this last summer under the Strong Families, Strong Students grant program, and that helped 80,000 income-eligible families in this state. This bill also has income triggers. It's available first to those with an income 50,000 and under, and then 75,000 and under, and then anyone if there are still funds left. But no new authorities granted to the State Board of Education. The Constitution forbids them from having any authority over homeschool students, and the parental rights statutes remain solidly in place as well.
Who decides, with this bill, who decides who gets the scholarships and who doesn't? I mean, I try to apply for health and welfare in order to get the assistance, and I tell you, the application process never makes sense. And I'm really nervous about creating a whole new structure of applications and then judgments and approvals by some committee that we don't know or don't elect. So who makes the decisions about these, who gets the money on the scholarship side of things?
So it'll be a first come, first serve. If you apply and you're income eligible, you'll be at the top of the list. And we did learn some really valuable lessons from the first program that had a whole reimbursement process, and you had to provide receipts and income verification. This will be different than that. This will be an Amazon-type marketplace where the funds will go into an account, and then you'll be able to choose from a menu of eligible education expenses. And so you won't have to verify, you won't have to do the whole receipt thing unless you're asked to verify it. But other than that, we expect this to be a lot less of an administrative hassle.
One more question way back there.
Yes, sir.
Real fast,
I
please.
see that no money is taken away from public schools. Is the Education Association in favor of this?
No, sir, they are not. Their phone banks are activated now against it.
Thank you.
But can I
Yes,
just
go ahead.
add, of the 80,000 students that the first iteration of the program helped, over 90% of them were public school students. And so this is a bill that doesn't care what system your child is in or whose chair they're sitting in. It's to help the child first and foremost, regardless of what system they're in.
Okay, thank you so much. And I want to add that Representative Horman, this has gone back and forth, a lot of input, so this has really been fine-tuned to where it needs to be. So she did an excellent job and followed the process. Okay, and Beth is going to bring up our next bill to talk about it.
Will you bring them up? I'm just going to go through the bills.
Okay, she's going to go through the bill. I've got Representative Mordaunt. Come on up here, Representative. And this is House Bill 298. You're going to love this one. It is parental notification to get a vaccine. Very important. Go ahead.
Okay. The only one, we were just going to add one other thing that I didn't show you earlier, and that is to get you to the statement of purpose. So you would do the same thing. You would start at the very beginning. The statement of purpose is important just because you can go to it and it tells you exactly what the bill is. So where I left you off last time at the Bill Center with the numbers, you would just click on it and you're going to see the statement of purpose pull up. That's going to show you what it is and just basically give you a great summary of the bill. So forgot to include that last time, but that's important to take that next step to get into the statement of purpose.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Okay, Representative Mordaunt, thank you.
Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, raise your hand if you believe that parents have the right to make decisions on their children's health care. Raise your hand. Oh, unanimous. That's amazing. Parents do indeed have the right to make decisions regarding their children's health care. Now, I've just handed out something that I've received from my school district. You may have received this from your school district. You may be, like me, maybe have received dozens of these over the years. It's interesting. I would describe this piece of paper by 3 simple words: misrepresentation by omission. Misrepresentation by omission. Why is that? Simply because my child in this letter, I am being informed that they cannot go to school in this unless they have a certain immunization. I have gotten this particular piece of paper over and over and over, saying my child cannot go to school if they don't have certain immunizations, vaccines. When in fact, this legislature years ago carved out exemptions for vaccines. A parent's right supersedes this piece of paper. Parents simply don't know that. Now, this bill that is just a very simple bill, 3 lines, and it simply says that parents have to be informed. If there is a letter that goes out, if there's any communication from a district, very simply, school officials shall describe the exemptions provided in this section and provide a citation and a description anytime information goes out to parents regarding vaccines. Simple bill, right? But profound in that we reestablish that parents are in the driver's seats of their child's education. We have to put parents back in charge. We as a legislature have already protected those rights, but apparently not enough, because we get communications that are misrepresenting those rights. So with this very simple bill, we put parents in an informed position, which is an empowered position where they belong and where we have already protected those rights. So I'm happy to entertain questions on this, but I hope that you can join me in letting legislators know in this building that parents have a right to make decisions regarding their children's health care. Yes?
I have a question on the word verbal. It says it must include a verbal description. I think of that as a spoken and not a written.
Ah.
What do you mean by verbal?
I mean a full description. Very often we see, as you can see in this letter, there is a code reference, 394802, Section 2, Title 15. Very often we see this code reference in communications. We just don't see a description. And this same section is about immunizations, but it is also about the exemptions. And let me just tell you that those exemptions, they do include in that same section of code, that one of the exemptions is if the life or health of your student would be impacted by that vaccine, any particular vaccine. That's pretty serious. But also equally as serious is a parent's religious and philosophical feelings about vaccines, and that also ought to be equally protected and described. So thanks, that's a great question. Other questions? Yes, at the back.
Is there a definition of vaccine as opposed to the traditional vaccine which contains virus parts, as opposed to what they're calling a vaccine now, which is experimental gene therapy?
Thank you. You know, I appreciate that question, and I believe that there will be further legislation that you may even see in this legislative session that may further clarify that. But I'm simply clarifying the rights of parents and the transparency of policy. So thank you. I think that will be addressed. It is just not in this bill in terms of parental rights. Yes?
Can you tell me exactly where your bill is now?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it is about to be heard on the House floor. And then hopefully we'll get a hearing on the Senate side. I would appreciate your help in contacting our parents if this is something that you would like to join me in. Other questions? Yes, please.
It seems like the legislature has made a lot of good laws in the past, and groups like school districts completely ignore them and send letters like you're talking about. Can there be a bill
I appreciate the question. Do we need to go further in asserting the rights of parents? Absolutely, in education. And you will hear me say it over and over. This is one piece of legislation that we are bringing forward as a legislature and me as personally in terms of putting parents in that driver's seat. They are in charge of their child. These are minors. We do have to empower our parents when it comes to education, and we will continue to do that. So thank you. Appreciate that. Yes.
So with this, in regards to this specific letter that has went out, is this in violation, am I hearing correctly that this is in violation of something? And if so, then is there consequences, and are those being followed through with the people that issued this letter?
Consequences, no. In violation, yes, as soon as this passes. So please do help me get this passed. Thank you. I do want to leave some time for Representative Moon, who is also covering a bill. But thank you so much for joining me. And again, putting parental rights first. Thank you.
All right, aren't those ladies working hard for you? Okay, we have one more bill presentation this afternoon before we close. And if you've been following what's happening nationally and in Congress, just recently through the House was passed H.R. 8, which is they call it the Background Checks Act of 2021. Now, some people would say, what's wrong with doing a background check? Well, part of what this bill does, if you dig deep through the legislation, this legislation will repeal the Charleston Exemption. What that is, the Charleston Exemption basically says that if right now under our law that the federal agency is required to complete these background checks within 3 days. And if they don't complete it within 3 days, then they have the option to go forward with the transfer of the firearm. But this law will repeal what some people call a loophole. And the problem with this is that the federal agency could indefinitely postpone your background check, and that would be a violation of our constitutional rights. So I will remind, that's why it's so important that we do what we need to do on the state level to protect our constitutional right, our Second Amendment right. Because I will remind the people in the House and the Senate on the national level of what our Constitution of Idaho says, and it says, the people have the right to keep and bear arms, which right shall not be abridged. So help me welcome Senator Zito to give us a brief update of the Small Arms Protection Act for Idaho. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you for being so supportive of this. We got a print hearing, so now we are actually House Bill 300. Thank Representative Crane for that. He gave us that, and now we're just waiting to see when we will get a full hearing on this. I think it's really important that when we talk about this piece of legislation, we need to emphasize how groundbreaking this really is. I don't think anywhere in our country do we have anything else quite like this. Not only does this go to bat for our Second Amendment, there are provisions in there that would protect our 5th, 9th, 10th, and 14th. And I really honestly believe that in addition to that, it would protect any challenge to any of our constitutional rights. Because let's just face it, what we know is coming down, the actions that we're seeing taking place now, our constitutionally guaranteed rights are definitely under attack and under fire. So one of the beauties of this piece of legislation is, what we in effect do is we protect our local law enforcement, our state, county, city, whatever, law enforcement people, so that if they refuse to participate in enforcing unconstitutional federal law, we offer them criminal and civil immunity for that. And everything that we've done in this bill is backed up either by case law or Constitution. So we've gone through, we've done the homework. Alex Kincaid did an amazing job, and if any of you would like, get me your email address and I'll send you a copy of all of the information that I have that cites all of the court cases, and you can go into them in depth. You're all familiar with the Prince versus the United States. That's kind of the basis for this. So what we do is we direct the Attorney General that if there is a challenge, that he will take that challenge up in court. But then we take it a step further with the intervention, and we say if the Attorney General, for whatever reason, doesn't, then the legislature can have either the sponsor or a co-sponsor of this bill, if they still happen to be serving in the legislature, they can stand in court. And if they can't, if they're no longer serving, then the legislature, by concurrent resolution, can choose a member of the current legislature to defend this in court. So really, I mean, it goes so far beyond even the Second Amendment that I'm looking at all of the legislation that we're running, and it's all important. It's all so important. And it's not because I am the sponsor on this, but I cannot stress enough how important it is going to be to defend our rights. And for the legislature and the governor of the state of Idaho to lay that groundwork and to have that legislative intent in place is so very, very important. So I would encourage you to let Representative Crane know that you support this, that we're looking forward to a hearing on this. I messaged him this morning. I know he's really, really busy, and he probably just didn't have time to get back to me so that I could let you know when it would be. And then I think it's important that you message our senators and let them know how important this is to you and to our state. We tried to get a hearing in the Senate, and we just weren't successful. And so I'm really grateful to Representative Crane for letting us have this hearing in his State Affairs Committee. So you're probably short on time, but what I'll do is I'll just stay here afterwards, and if you have any questions, I'll answer your questions unless, do we have?
I just have one question.
Okay.
All of our law enforcement here in Idaho, are they required, or is there any specific training for the Constitution so that they know when a citizen's constitutional rights are being violated?
Do you know, I don't know if that's taught at Post. I don't know if there's specifically a class on the Constitution. Do we have any? Yes.
Yes, ma'am. They do cover the Constitution in reference to aspects of law enforcement.
Okay.
So it is covered.
Thank you.
Especially the Fourth.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes.
But they also subscribe to the Southern Poverty Law, managing the steps will be the opposite of the Constitution. And they use that in their own little training center.
Okay. All right. She made the comment that they also, she's saying that they use and read the Southern Poverty Law Center, and that they will use that in their training centers. Again, I can't, I'm not arguing, I'm just saying I can't verify that. That's someone else's comment. Did we have another one? Are we good? One more.
I understand that it's a federal crime for government officials to violate their oath. So can we hold them accountable for trying to take away our Second Amendment?
I think that this legislation would provide the legislative intent and the vehicle to be able to do something like that, yes.
Okay.
Good? Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Good job. Thank you, Senator Zito. Okay, I've got about 30 seconds to talk to you real fast about HB 174. This is a bill that I just brought forward, and it's through the House. It's now on the way to the Senate. Stephen Thane, the Senate chairman, is going to give me a hearing on the 22nd of this month. And this bill, what it does is that a school board may negotiate with a local education association or union instead of shall. It is literally changing shall to may. And the reason a lot of this has come up because of the situation with the West Ada School District where there was a sick out That is illegal. You're not supposed to strike, and they were going to be taken to court by the parents, and then they pulled back and started negotiating to get back in school, but it took a couple of months. So a lot of suffering with our students, and we needed to make sure that they're in school and getting an education. And anyway, so this is going to allow school boards to do that, because now if there's bad actors in this, you can't fire them, because right now the state compels the school for the teachers to be represented by unions if they have a 50+1 majority to say so. And this kind of levels the playing field so that we have better acting on both sides. So anyway, follow that bill and call your senators to support it. And now our lovely Lieutenant Governor is going to finish out. Thank you.
I love the curtain that Representative Moon put on the door there that says, "We the people." And it's because of you all that we're able to conduct these meetings and see some movement on some bills. And I want you to know how important you are and how appreciated you are, your attendance. So last week, when we had Dr. Cole speak to our group, I always like to track how many people are here today, in person. We've had about 100 to 120 personally. But I also track the number of views of our video that we put out there live stream. And so last week, a combination of the video on my Facebook page and others, we had over 7,000 views of that presentation. Oh, I stand corrected. I've been corrected to know that it's 15,000. So because of that, we're going to bring Dr. Cole back next week. And next week, he'll be talking with us more in depth on vaccines. So good news for next week. Just to wrap things up again, thank you for being here. I want a special thank you to Dave for driving all the way from Bear Lake County. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you. And also, if all of our legislators could please stand, all those that are here, please stand so that you can be recognized. So thank you so much to Representative Moon. Thanks to Jordan and Beth and you all, and Dustin and Josh. Thank you for your help, and we'll see you next week.